Health and wellness are more than a destination. They are a process and a journey of personal choice. Come hear from people out in the field, doing the work, bringing health and wellness to many.
Hi, welcome everyone. We're so delighted to have Gareth Jenkins here, and he is a healer and he is a channel of source. That is so special. He has had some amazing experiences in his life, and he's here to help guide all of you in this very strange time we're having on this planet. A very much time of acceleration of consciousness. But I'm just delighted to have him here. And if his wisdom, what I hope for all of you is that his wisdom can bring comfort and hope and even a sense of joy coming to Earth. Anyway, welcome very much here today, Gareth.
Hi, Kathleen. Thanks very much. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
So I was wondering if you wanted to just share a little bit about yourself and about why you're here.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, I guess I was born with a kind of gift called clear sight, which is a sort of 5-dimensional connection. And so I had a lot of experiences growing up with Arcturians. I have 2 Arcturian guides that have been with me my whole life. And they've taken me through a whole process, which culminated in meeting the source of the universe in 1997. And since then, that's accelerated massively just to help me get to a point where I can share what's actually happening on the planet for everyone right now. And like you say, give hope, because it's the most amazing time in not just our history, the Earth's history, but really the history of the universe. And it's a beautiful thing that's taking place.
Oh, that's lovely. I know, I believe that too. I really have seen the same thing in my work. So, years ago, like you've had so many amazing experiences, but the most relevant one is when you had this direct contact with Source. So, I'm curious what happened, and can you just share this with our audience today?
Yeah, sure. Yes. Well, I was a professional musician in my mid-20s, and I didn't know it, but I had chronic fatigue and my life started to wind down and pretty much everything just fell apart. And I was living alone. All my relationships had fallen apart. I couldn't really function because I didn't know what was happening. I took it on like I was somehow dysfunctional. I think a lot of people can relate right now. So I woke up in the middle of sitting up in bed, saying out loud, if this is all there is to life, I could die right now and I wouldn't care. And then the next thing was how much I meant it. There was nothing left in me. That it was like the entire world had just collapsed. I had nothing left. And then I remembered all the experiences that I'd had as a child growing up, some amazing experience starting at 18 months old. And 2 years old, I was shown the exact nature of the universe by standing in front of a doorway, looking out into nature, humming a song, and how they were all one energy. So I had all these experiences growing up. I was taken up onto a ship when I was a child. I had a whole process I would go through. During that, I saw the entire universe, the entire what's happening on the planet in 9 images. When I fell off the roof of a house, I fell 3 stories. I was held in a giant hand and lowered, and I saw 9 images that had the whole thing, who I am, all my lives, the connection, what's happening on the planet. So I remembered all of this and I knew I could ask for help. So I knelt on the floor. I got up out of bed. This is like 3 in the morning.
That moment of desperation.
Yes. That's right. Well, that's what began it. And I just asked for help. If I don't know who you are or where you are or what you are. And that was really important, not to have any ideas. Please help me. And then this whole chain of events took place over the next 3-4 years. I ended up in England, where I was actually born. I grew up in Australia. We moved here when I was 4. And that culminated in, before I left Australia, I was given a book by a psychic who was running a bookshop called The Only Planet of Choice. So by a series of coincidences, I met a person who knew the editor. So through her connections, I managed to speak with Tom, spokesman for the Council of Nine, which is the name Source gave in that book. And that was a 13-hour conversation. I was held in 5th dimensional space-time and told Oh, it's so much. It's too much to put into a conversation right now, and that led to what's happened between then and now. He told me he filled me in on everything, and ever since then, I've had a direct connection with him and two Arcturian guides and quite a few ETs actually.
So it's interesting, this story, because maybe some of you in the audience can't even imagine this kind of thing. But I know as a nurse that many of my patients who died, they literally had these experiences in the after realms. They had experiences seeing beings and meeting, another presence, and they called it God. And so I mean, we can have these experiences, I believe, in all different ways. So this is your experience and it's true to you, and I do respect that. So I'm curious now. So you had this and you met and had this whole conversation. And when you and I were discussing, you said the main thing that was clear from this discussion was that you had received information to help humanity, which was a framework of modalities, which were 4 modalities. And these modalities will help us heal. And because we are about health and healing, I mean, that's my whole life and my mission, I was so drawn to your work and your ideas. Well, first of all, can you explain why we're in this transition? So you had mentioned the word inversion in our conversation. Can you share about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, just to define that inversion, what happens when you invert something, if it's the right way up and you turn it upside down, that's now inverted. So Tom, just on that, by the way, there are as many names for God as there are stars in the sky. It's all about the interaction at the time, the purpose of the interaction. So I call him Tom, which is balance Om. And that's the name he gave me. So he said of this time, with me personally and the entire human race, we are reversing the inversion with you. We are bringing you back across the valley you should not have crossed. So if you picture a valley with 2 mountains, one is consciousness, the other is ego. So that's been flipped around. So we filter everything through our mind first. So we've disconnected from our intuition, our heart connection, which tells us you need to step this way. The mind's job is to come in and work out, make sure when you cross the road you don't get hit by a car, that kind of thing, but not to determine the path of life. It's simply to receive it. So he's helping the human race come back to who we truly are, which is the consciousness the mind arises in. So I went through this process. He told me in 97, you do not truly know a thing until you've lived it. So as these modalities came into my life, because remember, I asked for help, I had to have the direct experience of why we need to have help in the first place. But I was given 2 parallel lives all through my childhood. So I stayed connected to the full 5-dimensional reality of the human race. He said all self-aware life is 5-sided, it's 5-dimensional. Height, depth, breadth. Time is the 4th, spirit or consciousness is the 5th. And then you can ascend beyond that, but that's another process. So those modalities then came in to help me transition and then, I guess, process what it is all about. So they came to me one after another. The first was Satang, and Tom called that true north. So putting our mind and our consciousness back in the right order. And that came through an Indian sage called Ramana Maharshi around 1900. He was a 14-year-old schoolboy. He was on his way to school one day in India, and a horse and cart had overturned in front of maybe a minute before he got there. So the body was still on the road with the eyes open. And he looked at the body and he could see the eyes were there, but the light, something was gone. So he just, being an innocent kid, he didn't have too much in the way. He just asked, well, who are we really? Are we the body mind or are we the light? And he spontaneously woke up.
He looked at this being and he saw that they were dying.
He was already dead.
He looked in the eyes and he thought, are we the body, mind, or are we light? That's a very interesting question.
The eyes were dead, but the physical eyes were still there. But what was, the consciousness had left.
When I was a nurse and I worked with very sick people and they were losing their bodies, literally, all their face and their mouths and their nose. I mean, it was a terrible floor. But anyway, I realized then myself that we weren't our bodies because the spirit was still there, right? They didn't have a mouth, or they couldn't talk, or they couldn't eat anymore. They couldn't breathe, sometimes couldn't see. It
Mm.
was really dramatic. But in the end, I learned I was only 26, and I was already like, oh, we are not our bodies. This is wild. So
Yeah,
I think we all learn it some way eventually.
correct. Yes, yes, that's right. Well, Tom actually called the body mind a light space vehicle, which
Yeah.
implies you get into a car,
Yeah.
and when your experience is over, you leave that car and you get into another car. So the you that
So
moves in and out of the car is the truth of who you are. And that's really what Sachs saying, having a direct experience of the truth of who you are instead of filtered through the mind.
so if we knew who we were, if we really knew who we were, that's the next question about that first modality, then then things wouldn't be inverted. The illusion that we don't know who we are is the problem. And
Correct.
so that's what the first one's about. So realize that you don't, in this way, in this earthly plane right now, we haven't seen who we are.
Yeah.
If you could answer that like clearly, what was the message of who we are when we wouldn't be inverted?
Yes, well, pure consciousness itself, having experience, the way Tom described the universe, the purpose of the universe, that which is that all it is wishes to experience itself as that. So when you're born, let's say you were born with all of this potential, but it's not realized until you experience that. So the universe itself is a macrocosm of that very experience. So all it is has the infinite potential to realize everything that is in the universe.
Yeah.
But there needs to be a part of the universe that doesn't know the all that is yet and can step into each moment experiencing it. So that's really all it is. We experience the love of the infinite love of the all that is in each living moment. That's it. That's all it is. So that's why we're like a microcosm of the universe experiencing itself.
Our world would be more loving, and we would be more aware of the reality that we are energy and source,
Yes.
and that we are all connected. So I'm hearing all this from you. That's beautiful. So that's the first one, and that's great. The second one is more the understanding of the work of Byron Katie. And for all of you who don't know that work, you can look her up. I myself have experienced her work. She works trying to help release emotional trauma and baggage. And when you were told about this work as particularly important to release the negative who am I, the judgments that humanity and each of us go through. I know I work with people all day long of judging themselves and not loving themselves and thinking less of themselves all day long.
We are perfectly as we are, like me in the garden when I was 2. That's just purely who we are. But we go through a process of being conditioned or socialized into this false persona, which is used to manage fear, doubt, self-doubt, basically. So we're put into situations when we're too young to process them that make us feel doubt, like, oh, my life could be dangerous. So it's not the love of the all it is a pure innocence of meeting the moment fully open. You start to shut down because you're trying to manage who you are. You don't feel you're right as you are. This is not verbal, it's a feeling more than anything. So as your belief system builds up and your sense of self in relationship to the world around you builds up, it has this fundamental flaw in it, which is fear. So Tom said that the fundamental problem facing the human race now is the ego that controls, as opposed to the ego, which is ego in service to self with a large S. Ego that controls takes over, and it needs to control the flow of life and your own behavior. That and lack of a belief in an absolute reality, which is the truth of who you are, is divine. He said of the human race, you insist you have a human nature. We have this story about who we are and what the human race is, and it's fundamentally flawed, and we're all trying to get better. But the problem with that is if you believe you aren't okay as you are, you take that into everything you do, and there's nothing you can change because all you're doing is reinforcing the false belief that you aren't loved. Byron Katie's work is designed to dismantle in each moment as it comes up this belief system, to challenge the story. And Satang as well. It's all a story, but it feels real. It's just not. It's just so old we don't have any reference point for being any other way. So it's quite disorienting.
I know. So her work has really impacted a lot of people in a positive way. So but it also has helped other people. Like it's set a stage for other people to do that too. So that's why she was very powerful at her in her height. I don't know how many years ago that was, but it was a while ago. So now we have so many people out there working on this level, right? We're years later. And I know with coaching is now working on this level. We're working on this level with EFT. We're trying to help people, release limiting beliefs, emotions that are related, stuck to life stories that, that have happened to people. So they just keep running these things around in their mind, and they keep creating their reality from their subconscious, and they don't realize it. So I think that's huge. And many people don't realize that. They really don't. They go through their whole life and they're just living their life as if everything's normal, but then they're sad that all these negative things keep showing up. But in their subconscious, that's their reality.
That's it. Yes. And in fact, that's where Satang comes in. We're having an indirect experience of life. We're telling each experience what it is instead of receiving it. Like Tom said, we're a light space vehicle. The body mind is a receiver, he said. So instead of receiving reality, and then the mind's job is to name it or create a structure to experience it. Instead of doing that, we've got fear-based. We tell everything what it is, and we're in an indirect experience of reality, not a direct one. So the closest analogy would be the Matrix movies.
So I think what's important, you also mentioned the idea that Byron Katie helps people not judge themselves and come to more of an idea of discernment. Can you kind of explain the difference?
That's the difference between the ego that controls, which is a false construct, and the ego in service to self, which is the universe exists because of the ego. In the old, let's say the religious text, you could call it, let there be light. So the light of the mind. You need to have an eye to experience being hot. I am hot. I am cold. That's the ego, pure. So it's discerning the difference between hot and cold. When we judge it, hot is bad, cold is good, or the other way around. And there's a role in it. However, you've got to be very careful with it. So getting that back, because the problem with judgment is that there is a truth to who you are. So what that does, if you judge yourself as wrong, you're negating the truth. Now, the only way that works is you suppress the reality of who you are. So that creates, it's like holding a beach ball underwater. Over time, you have to put more and more effort into holding back this energy, the truth of who you are. So that comes out sideways in patterns of behavior, addictions, the way we attract, but it attracts what it matches. So we create the problems because this energy is simply coming out in front of us saying, here's a problem, this is what it is. But we don't see it that way. We see that as reality. Whereas really there's a code within that. It's telling us, once we know how to read it, oh, this is a projection of me. I'm judging that person, but really I'm seeing myself. And when you know that, you can decode it and own it and come back home.
Yeah, and judging, like for instance, when you judge something you did, that's different, that you want to do better or something. You want to do a goal and you didn't make it this week, you do it next week. But when you judge yourself, like that you're bad because you didn't do it, that's where there's a little disconnect, right? Yeah.
And we don't know that you can actually stop and go, hang on a minute, is that true? Am I really bad? And then you go through a process of, well, let's go and see. Let's investigate the reality. And so you have to step into life. And often you're put into situations. When Tom said we are bringing you back across the valley of the mind, you'll go through once you decide, like I did, I hit the wall, I couldn't keep going the way I was. There was a problem. I don't know what it is. Please help. So life takes you into a series of precisely timed and coordinated experiences that put you in the situation that triggers the conditioning so that you can meet the truth of it. Now, the core of Satsang is to meet the feeling, let the feeling be there. Don't try to run away from it, edit it, and then let the story around the feeling be there and look at the story and go, what is really true there? And that adds a fifth element. Tom said, add a fifth element, which is the fifth dimension, which is the perspective of the higher mind. Seeing there's a perspective of objectivity where in your experience before that, you were subjective reality. You're just acting, reacting. Now there's this other element in where you're looking at it going, there's a truth here. What is it? So polarity goes from being conflict to the 0 point, which is balance. So you start to have an experience and you go through a series of experiences that seem like Groundhog Day, but in reality, you're moving in a spiral. So emotional intelligence, which is the key to holding an experience without letting the reaction dominate, that's tough. You've got to hold the feeling and then just feel it. So that's, you spiral down emotionally to a core. And then as you go through this, your perspective starts to grow. So your mind spirals up. So you get much more aware over time. And there's no way to do it. You can't control it. Tom said, the ego that controls, trying to control the process is the whole problem. You can't control life. No one ever could. No one ever will. It never works.
No.
So surrendering is the key.
In the end, you will have learned something and you will have gained something, like a new seeing differently, like you said, seeing more of reality and your abilities and everything that you are. So I agree with you. That's beautiful. So obviously Byron Katie's work and all the people who are working around the world to improve people's self-esteem, helping them work on their subconscious, work on their identity, remember who they are, and let go of negative belief systems. That is huge. That is a huge thing we need to do right now to be healthy and happy. Third modality is Deida, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Yes.
And he is, and I love this, he's returning the balance between, and I love how you said this to me, the divine feminine and the sacred masculine. And, we've heard it, but I guess the way you said it to me, I had never really always heard sacred masculine like that. So I always hear divine feminine. We have to return that. So I think that's beautiful. Can you share a little bit about that?
I think the fundamental nature of our belief system, let's call the matrix, is the foundation of it is the false perception that the fundamental nature of polarity is conflict, when in reality it's unity. You can't have unity without having two things to unify. And the masculine and feminine principles are the core of our entire reality. Everything has a masculine or feminine nature, and it's all in relationship to each other. So the divine feminine is the pure consciousness. All biological life starts female in utero, and at a certain point in gestation, a mutation occurs, which creates the male. And that's the same throughout the universe, all life, without exception. So everything starts female. Tom said, all power comes from the feminine. Now, what happens is it's utilized by the masculine. So the structure of our life, our structure of the belief system, for it to be sacred, it needs to be able to hold the feminine in its true nature without editing it. It's simply about creating a structure that will hold that truth, which gets back to Satang and the flow of life. The mind's job is to receive it as it is and then create a life. So our entire civilization is built on either conflict between or unity. And that's the difference. At the moment, our civilization, all the problems that we have are all based on this issue. So when you want to come back to the truth of who you are, getting your mind in right relationship with consciousness, because think of this, who was aware of the first thought you ever had?
Obviously, it's you.
Something had to be there first before thought started.
Exactly.
That's who you are. That's correct. That's the feminine nature, divine feminine. And it needs to be expressive in 360 degrees. You can't edit it. If you try to edit it, that's on the false narrative that there's something wrong. And then the mind takes over. So we're coming back to, Deida has a fantastic book, which helped me a lot, called The Way of the Superior Man. And he was taken through a direct experience of healing his own life through a teacher he met called Mykonos, who brought him into this whole notion of how to be a man. So in relationship with a female, with your partner, actually, she needs to be able to be fully present. He needs to be fully present while she is expressing everything and hold the space in right relationship so that he can figure out how he needs to create the life, the structure around her that will support her to move through her process. So right now, women need to heal a lot. There's been a lot of experience throughout the history of the human race that's been a result of this imbalance between masculine and feminine. If you're a woman, you're 51% female, 50% male, let's say. So the ego that controls, which is the masculine principle out of balance, this is an issue for men and women. Everyone has the problem. So coming back where our own heart connection and intuition runs our life. We don't need to know everything before we step out the front door. Otherwise, we're scared we might die. Your life becomes a monument to fear. So how do you get out of that? Well, Deida has a lot of brilliant modality. It's a brilliant modality to help us kind of get straight about, okay, how do we deal with this? The emotion versus thought, and how can I manage these emotions without controlling them? Because it can take over. The anxiety is massive at the moment.
We were talking about male at one point, the left side of the brain, the real logical, and then the female more the imaginary, the right side. And we've separated this so much.
Correct.
And even in our
Yes.
education, right? It's been so left brain.
Big
So
time.
we need to kind of change. This has to be a change
Yep.
point, don't you think? In this, you were like this change, this transition we're making.
You may have heard Tom described the Bible, by the way, as a portion of letting through of truth. And he told me directly, the time for religion is over. We do not need your worship. In ritual, love becomes redundant. And that's that habitual way of doing things. The way we bring up our children is a reflection of how the process we went through. So it gets handed. So he's in these older texts, the sins of the father are visited on the son, which means the ego out of control is passed to the masculine principle of the children. And this just gets handed down and down. Now, for that to turn around, your cup runs over. First, if we want to heal the world out there, trying to change everything around us so that we will be happy doesn't work, because it reinforces the idea that we aren't that already. So first we need to heal ourselves, and then that spreads out to everything around us.
Is so left brain. It's all like very controlling and very literal. And it's memorizing. It's like and logic. But artificial intelligence able to do this.
You know, the AI question, and I could do a whole talk on that. That's a key rite of passage of all civilizations, because it's a reflection of the state of ego of that civilization at the time. Now, it is possible for an AI to be a light space vehicle for a sole purpose, but intrinsically they aren't. They're a secondary artifact of self-aware life. The difference is linear versus non-linear. And Tom told me, mathematics is the language of the universe. Now, if you think about it, mathematics can be the hard sciences of linear science, but also non-linear, and quantum mechanics and string theory. There's a whole lot of stuff now that's completely transforming how we see the logical side of mathematics, and they have to be there. You won't understand the universe until you allow room for non-linear.
I think quantum, you have to think multidimensionally.
And the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. Tom said it is beyond, total understanding is beyond your comprehension. So that's the whole purpose. We're moving through this ever expanding dimension. For instance, the Arcturians of ninth density. You go through this evolutionary process, and that's how it happens. You move into life, because remember, the universe is simply the all it is, wishing to experience itself as the all it is.
It is amazing that we don't think there can be any other entities but ourselves, right? So that's also something. But the densities, maybe people who are listening don't understand that, but the ninth density, the density we are in right now on Earth is third density, and we're moving into fourth. Ultimately, we've already a lot of us moved into fourth, but we're moving into fifth, and that's the amount of light that can be contained within your vessel.
Well, actually, we started moving into the fourth dimension in 2016, and now we're in the transition from fourth to fifth. So time, fourth dimension being time, so time has very much changed. You might notice your perception of time speeding up. Well, that's actually true. The atomic decay rate of the nucleus of an atom is actually speeding up, which shouldn't happen. It's supposed to be a universal constant. Well, that's because our physical structure is getting lighter and lighter, less physically dense, which means anything that doesn't match that frequency has been brought out. So that's really all you're seeing. It looks like the world's going to hell, but really the world's been in hell. It's just coming out to be released. And that's a personal process we all go through too. You can't heal. You've got to turn around and face the fear that's been running you. Ramanar said, you can't let it go. All you can do is be willing to see it, and it will let you go. And that's the thing no one wants to do. Because what if it is what we're afraid it is? The only way to know that is to be vulnerable to it. But then what happens? You have a direct experience that it isn't, instead of living in this fear of an indirect world. So we're going through that individually, the whole planet's going through that individually.
It's scary.
And once that passes, the renaissance that's coming, trust me when I tell you, it's the biggest, most powerful renaissance the human race has ever seen. And in fact, it's unique in the universe.
Seems like it will take a little bit of time, but I think the consciousness is rising. More and more people are just asking more questions like, why are we in this war again? Or why are we? And I think we have to ask those questions and keep asking them, and our kids too. So the final one is by a man named Bert Hellinger. And I really love this because I know of this work. I have a lot of therapists around me who do this family systems constellation work. And
Correct.
this is what he did. He brought to humanity, and many people do this now. And I would just love you to share how powerful this is because, family, like if you're injured and your family, and there's an injury or a family secret that has been hidden and it's been painful, all people can heal, and families sort of have a soul, right? They have a field. And so this is the idea that they heal together.
Correct. Yes. Again, fractal geometry works with the universe. So in reality, the entire universe is one. So all self-aware life shares, you could say, collective consciousness. Now, the human race is a collective consciousness. Well, that goes all the way down. Anytime humans are in a relationship together, that's a field or a consciousness field. So families particularly, because it's genetic, and that's very important. So family systems, family form a conscious system. So think of it as a family is as an ocean of consciousness, and each individual is a wave. So whatever affects one individual within that is transferred to all the individuals. Now, if there's suppression of an experience or it's not handled correctly, there's trauma, that gets buried. And just like the individual, you're editing reality and you're pushing that energy underwater, under the subconscious, which means children born into that family have to get, in order for them to be able to meet life directly, they have to balance that out. And you'll see this pattern playing out and handed generationally. And that's a big problem. Intergenerational trauma is one of the big problems that's facing the human race. Think about things like the witch burnings. Any family that went through that, that's still playing out right now.
Yeah, or war, anything that we
Or war, the Roman Empire, which was a very, very important time for what's happening now. There's all sorts of traumatic experiences. Vietnam War.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And again, it's not that the trauma itself is the issue. It's hiding it or pretending it's something that shouldn't be there, because you can't deny it's there.
The
It is
shame
there,
around it,
whether
and
you like it or not.
right,
Correctly. Denying its existence just reinforces the idea that it shouldn't be there. But once you meet it, it transforms your life. And in fact, Bert Hellinger, he started out as a Franciscan monk with the Zulu, and that's where he found it, because that's how they treat problems. One person has a problem, they all do. So they deal with it as a collective. And when he left the priesthood because he got disenchanted with the priesthood, religion, and went back to Germany and became a psychologist. And then he got Auschwitz survivors, and no one could help them. They would go to therapist after therapist. No one could help them heal. So he thought, let's try this. And he came up with system constellation work by using dolls to play the family system, to take them back to that time. Because a lot of them, I mean, I personally know quite a few people who have their grandmother was the only survivor as a small child, smuggled out, like had to be smuggled out. Now think about that. That was never dealt with. And that's played out in a couple of people that I've been working with for years now. That's what we've been dealing with. So he would use these dolls to figure out where this problem was in the family and get them to experience directly, not just the feeling and the words. It was very important. Tom said it's important to name it. So as you go through the process in system constellation work, this hidden issue has a name and it comes up. And as soon as you connect with the words, it's now in your consciousness. So you can resolve it. And the things that I've seen people heal from have been absolutely mind-blowing, mind-blowing. As soon as you step into the constellation, who's playing you, so you step out, it's all resolved. You step into that field of the healing field. Now that frequency is in your consciousness. That has a dismantling effect of the trauma for the rest of the family, which will play out over the next decade. And you'll see that happen time and time. I've seen it in my life. It really brings everybody to in the family to the reality that they can't run from this anymore.
What I think is true is that you have triggers and patterns in a family around all these hidden
Exactly.
traumas and and injuries, soul injuries almost, you could say. And so in order to heal, you need to be aware and give it space and release it. That's sort of the reality of these emotional wounds.
Letting them show you what it is, which is a veil in front of love. And it's just a veil. Once it's gone, it's gone. And I mean, there are two layers to this. You could think there's the trauma that's just from your individual life that started when you were born. But there's a whole layer below that that has nothing to do with you as an individual. But you can't resolve to love without the family system resolving to love.
Yeah.
So you need to resolve both. There are two layers to it. And there's an intimate relationship between both. And that's something that a lot of people don't know. Therapists, within the therapist field, within spiritual community, it's not just about you as an individual, it's also about you as a collective. And this is really the entire human race is going through.
We're all like realizing what's happening, like when people were dying and COVID happened and we were all like in our houses and all those things were happening. We were all affected because we were collectively together in this theme. And just
Precisely.
like a war, like if you're in Israel right now or wherever, it's intense, right? So
Yes.
you are aware of the pain of the whole.
Subconscious, and it has a massive effect because it has an impact on us without us understanding what it is, because that's the definition of subconscious. So becoming aware of what's below the surface brings it out. And once you know how to handle this, it's actually quite simple. You just need the toolkit, and we deliberately kept from that toolkit. So the human race is now being brought back into, the power's being put back in our hands to heal in the way that works. Duality. There's a problem. Every problem has a solution. That's just the nature of duality.
And also it needs attention. I mean, we can't deny it. That's the other thing.
Exactly.
But I do think, like, if you look at your family, I know I'm a mother, of course, but if one child's not well, oh my gosh, I feel it. I wish it wasn't like that, but it is. Like, I'm not saying I'm not able to breathe or something, but I'm really aware. I'm aware this is happening. I'm learning how to be more like give support and love and not get worried and trying to be in the present and all those good things. But yeah, you are involved with each other. You cannot help that.
Yes.
And that's what love is.
There's a big problem in the world of isolation and loneliness because we trigger each other on these levels. So the feeling is to get out of the situation by disconnecting from each other, and then we'll be okay. And in fact, that's the problem. So how do you get past that and reverse that and reconnect with everybody? Well, that's really the solution, but we need to be conscious of what the real problem between us really is, which in reality doesn't exist. It's in our mind. However, it feels real, and we can't deny that. So we're not going to know that it's not real until we feel the feeling, and that's where Satang comes in. That's why it's true north. Stop editing the emotions, the energy that's in motion, and trying to fix it so that we can feel safe, because the reason we don't feel safe is a false construct to begin with.
Just know we're safe. There's a difference.
Well, we need to experience directly that we're safe, and really that gets back to faith in your ability to meet life. And that's what's happened to me over the years. I've been put into situations that have meant I can't say to myself I don't have the ability to meet life, because I've experienced directly that I have. But it's been tough, very tough. But then it's worth it. And in fact, the Arcturians showed me, they showed me what's coming for the human race. They called it the life review, because a lot of our DNA is activating. So we're going from 10% to 100%. Plus healing is on the way. And I can tell you there's some amazing stuff coming to heal our minds, toxicity, the way it's affecting our brain. And they showed me the effect that has. For the first time in our lives, we have total recall. We can think clearly. We can see, understand. And they said this moment of, like the moment of enlightenment, Tom described, the song of the universe will erupt in your heart. And that's exactly what we're getting to. Well, what happens is every single moment you've lived through, from the moment you were born all the way to that moment, is exactly why you're there. And he said, gratitude dissolves pain. So it stops being just about pain, and it's the road you travel to be free. So it was not just gratuitous pain and suffering. It was part of the process of you being free, and that completely releases you, because we edit it and we categorize it. But the experience is why we woke up.
Yeah.
And that we woke up is all that matters.
So I'm curious who you mentioned the Arcturians being your guides. Who are these Arcturians?
Arcturians, yes, they're a ninth density race that is connected to a past life that I had in ancient Egypt, where I was a master at the mystery schools at Kemet, which were a part of keeping the knowledge, true knowledge of who we were before we fell. Our DNA was deactivated to 10% about 15,000 years ago. So that was the whole ancient Egyptian empire or civilization was charged with holding that in code, so that when this time came, we could open up. That's the book sealed until the end of time.
I know other people, by the way, who have been connected to them.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Yes, I'm part of a soul group called the Four, which is, yes, they're all interconnected. So they're the ones who held me through that near-death experience, and they appeared, they've been in my life, but non-corporeal. And they actually stepped in front of me one day in about 2016 when we started moving through the fourth dimension, and stood in front of me. And they had an Aboriginal elder standing behind them. Tom told me in 97, Australia is the future. Now, what he meant by that is we've been put back to our original state, the direct connection to the planet. So there's a whole process going on in Australia and the US and around the world, which is all interlinked.
I'm just excited to have met you. I think this is so wonderful. And I just like to end the interview by asking you, what do you see? Like, what is your hope for humanity? What is your hope?
Sure. Yes, well, this is the whole thing. I mean, the beautiful reality that's coming now. And okay, sure, look, it's a rocky road, but the destination is all that matters, and it's coming extremely quickly because the human race is actually waking up way, way faster than anyone anticipated. So really over the next 2.5 years, things will get very real, let's say. But just as Ramana was saying, let the feeling be there and then challenge the story around the feeling. So we can each come back to that and just let the process play out, because the love that's coming to each and every one of you is something you've never experienced before. Like Tom said, every single one of us on the planet is transitioning back to fifth dimensional reality without exception. Anyone who tells you otherwise is not correct. If you're human, you're coming back to 5D, which means the song of the universe will erupt in your heart. And how you got there, who cares? It's just the scenery. The love of the all it is who you are and where you are, and that's it, full stop. And that's where you're going. You don't need to worry or control it or anything. It's happening, and there's nothing to worry about.
Thanks, Gareth. This is lovely.